not an exhaustive list. Actually, nothing in this talk is exhaustive. There are so many different things and visualized things in embedded devices that I could be here all day, and I don't even know enough to dive that deep into it. So, but there's a couple of different types of debug ports you might run into very commonly. One of these is serial consoles, so UART interfaces. These can be a console with debug messages. It can be a console that lets you log in for recovery in case your firmware is bricked. They can also be tied directly to like GE debug server subs. Then you have things like JTAG ports. So JTAG, I talked about it before with flash modules. While that can be used on flash modules, while those can be part of the chain, the most common thing to put on a JTAG chain is the processor. And using it for execution control and debugging code flow and problems there. So if the JTAG port is there, you have a decent chance of being able to connect to it with GDB and then control execution from there. The thing about JTAG though is because it's a generic protocol, the implementation of what's underneath that protocol, if you think about it like a TCP/IP stack kind of thing where you have application layer stuff that's kind of independent, just think of those devices on a JTAG chain as kind of that application layer where they vary a lot. So you have to actually configure your JTAG access for the adapter you're using to communicate, the board that the devices sit on that you're talking to, and the devices that you're actually talking to. The main tool for this is called OpenOCD, and you usually end up with like 3 or 4 config files for every component in your system, and it's not usually fun to work with. There's a little bit of a shortcut if you're using ARM. There's a little tool called Blackmagic Probe. I think like 1-bit square, I think might be the company name. It works for some ARM core systems, and so if that's what you're trying to exploit, this might be useful to you. It kind of skips all that configuration, and you plug it into the USB device with your computer. It gives you a serial interface you can connect GDB to. Then you have a debug connector, and on the other end, on the Blackmagic device, you just plug in through JTAG things. And I have no idea how it works, so Blackmagic is probably an name. Now, a lot of people will consider once you have debug access, again, this kind of goes back to what your goal is, but once you have debug access, you basically control execution, and so it's kind of considered a win as far as you've got an exploit. Now, oftentimes, you want to hack someone else, or show that you can hack someone else on your network. So this debug access literally becomes just that. It's debug access for your new development environment for finding other exploits. So here's a couple of example pictures from just some devices. At the top left is just a kind of serial adapter that has some extra GPIO pins that can be used. The bottom left is an example of a UART connector. Oftentimes you won't find them labeled. You just have to kind of get out a multimeter and figure out where your ground is, where your VCC is. You'll transmit and receive and kind of figure out the same way. This was a ASUS router, and they had things kind of nicely labeled on the UART side. The JTAG side was unlabeled, and actually almost every JTAG adapter you're going to find is not going to have header pins on it. So like those in the bottom right-hand side are on. That's kind of standard that things you have to do when you're working with this is you have to get out a soldering iron and hopefully not mess up your stuff. And then top right, one of the other problems with JTAG, the pins aren't labeled. There's only really like 6 pins, but they're usually on like headers with like 10 or more pins, sometimes like 14 pins. And so there's kind of like 6 main pins that are used for communication. And you have to figure out like, okay, which of these what 14 pin factorial is the right combination. So the JTAGulator is just a tool that helps you do that. And that's another serial adapter sitting next to it. So I'm just going to do a walkthrough of an attack scenario that kind of combines these different things to leverage into your attack and your exploit development process. So imagine that you have a target that, say, you're pen testing, or maybe you're a malicious actor. I hope you guys aren't, because I probably shouldn't be telling you how to do this then. But suppose that your target has internet exposed to system that has a listening service running for a proprietary management system. The vendor connects to it on its public IP on that port and sends it updates or holds data or whatever. You can't find any firmware publicly for the device. The support line won't talk to you unless you have a contract, which you have to pay for, and you have to sign an NDA as well. But just playing with the device, you found out that you could crash it by accident by sending it anything that's not a well-formatted request. But the target has to restart it anyway. It's not going to come back up. You can't just exhaustively try this. It requires human intervention in your client or your target, whatever. You might get upset and take the device offline if you keep crashing it. But you can find these systems on eBay, so you can get your hands on these to play with. So that's our scenario. What you might do in this situation, again, there's different ways these things can combine. You get that target from eBay or whatever. Say there's a Sorky flash module on board that you shipped before. You use just any kind of firmware programming tool to read from that with serial adapter, like in one of these pictures. Then once you have that image, that binary blob is not necessarily going to be well formatted and interpreted nicely by your computer. It's going to be like a bin file. It's just going to be the contents of Flash. A lot of it might be zeros even if it's they only use a portion of it. And so you have to make sense of that. There are tools that can help you with that. An automated one that's kind of a good first step, but often really fails you a lot, is BinWalk. And BinWalk will just look essentially for magic number header signatures for files, try and just pull those out. It will look for compressed files. It will run recursively on compressed files and extract compressed files from a firmware image. So that's good.